everyone. Welcome to this new episode of the Swift Academy podcast. Today we are with Antoine van der Rey, which is a famous iOS developer from Netherlands, iOS staff engineering in WeTransfer, with a career of 14 years, I think, from 2010 in iOS development. And it's great for me to be with to be our new guest in Swift Academy. First of all, hello Antoine, and how are you?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, doing great. I'm super happy to be here, and it's always fun to talk about the things that we like most, isn't it? Building apps and a little bit of history.
Yes, thank you. And for me, I think it will be discuss great topics today, which is our iOS tools, how to improve our productivity using iOS development tools, which are what are best practice that you will give to us to improve our productivity. And for the second part, it will be a practice time with your famous tools, which is RocketSim. That's
Absolutely.
why I will begin by classic question. And can you share a bit about your journey as iOS development and how you became staff engineering at WeTransfer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a long journey. I can go into much details, but let's just get started and see where we will be going.
Okay.
So, like you said, I started around 2010. I think it was iOS 4. But in all honesty, I didn't start with iOS. I
Mm.
did an internship at like a digital agency around the corner here, and they asked me to dive into Windows Phone because that was new.
Mm.
They didn't have any engineers for it yet, so um, my first application was something with Windows Phone, and eventually, I was like, well, I want to get a job quickly. So I want to add some more competences to my profile. So maybe I should do either Android or iOS. And at that point, I had an Android phone because that was cheaper. I just
Yes.
didn't have enough money for an iPhone.
Okay.
And I kind of loved the iPhone, but I just
Mm.
couldn't afford it myself. So at that point, I made a decision.
Yeah.
If I can make an iPhone app as my job, that is a way for me, to get into the environment of iOS and get my hands on. And that's how I started. And like I said, back in the days, iOS 4, I think Arc was just announced for iOS 5, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
But yeah, you can imagine that it were different times than it is today.
Mm.
So going forward, eventually I wanted to do a real project on my own, but the agency just didn't really have an option for that. So I switched jobs to another digital agency, which is a little bit bigger, still around the corner here at my hometown. And they did like the number one weather app in the Netherlands, the Netflix equivalent in the Netherlands, those kind of apps, which to me were like super big projects. And what you get if you work at an agency, and I think that this is already the first tip I would love to share to the listeners, like working at an agency allows you to work on a project for like 2, 3, maybe 4 months, and then you're pretty much done, right? Like the customer pays for a certain number of hours and a certain MVP project, but once that project is done, you as an engineer continue to work on another project. So I happen to work on that Netflix equivalent called Videoland, but also on Buienradar, like the weather application in the Netherlands. And all the learnings I took from one project, I applied in the second project. And then I realized like, oh, I can optimize my network layer even more. Or maybe I should write my UI in a more generic fashion from the get-go, right? So that was like a trampoline for me to really grow fast towards like being a senior and eventually becoming a team lead there for all the other iOS engineers.
Mm.
But still, it was an agency and you get to work on a project with limited hours, so you wouldn't write any tests. And while it was great that I could start a new project every now and then, I started to feel bad about it because the quality of code became better and better, and I had to say goodbye to code that I kind of loved, isn't it? So
Yes.
compared to being a junior where you're happy to leave the code behind eventually,
Yes.
I started to feel bad about the things that I built up that I couldn't continue. So that was the moment where I felt like, okay, this is becoming more repetitive. I'm just basically copying code over to the new project. I'm not being challenged so much anymore.
Yes.
And that was for me a moment to look further. And I think that would be the recommended journey I would give to others as well, right? Like try to build a bag of experience. And once you feel like, okay, I'm done at this place, there's not much going into that bag of experience anymore, that's when you want to level up. And yeah, for me, it was kind of a fun story. I applied for a conference, and back then I didn't have my blog, and I was basically just an iOS engineer like others, not really famous or no
Yes.
name. So getting a position at a conference was pretty challenging.
Yes.
But the Dutch conference, Do iOS, knew that I had a presentation laying around, and somebody was sick 24 hours before the conference started. So they called me and they said like, "Hey, Antoine, so we need a new speaker. Would you be able to be here tomorrow?" I was like, "Well, I'm going to the conference either way. I might as well just do the talk,
Yes.
isn't it?"
But you are not prepared.
Well, I mean, I did the talk at a meetup already, so I
Yes.
was kind of prepared, but
Yes.
by no means I was prepared for giving a talk in front of like 100 people in a conference, right? So I
Yes.
remember shaking and, like
Yes.
I was terrified.
Yes.
And it's recorded, and I can still look it back. And it's fascinating to see the things that I did wrong, or I said like all the time, and I spoke really fast, and I was still wearing my conference badge, which was jumping around on the camera.
Yes.
I don't know, but long story short, the project manager of WeTransfer turned out to be in the audience,
Ah.
and they were looking for a new mobile team. So he approached me after my talk and invited me for an introduction to the WeTransfer office, and
Okay.
that's how I ended up at WeTransfer almost 7 years ago, I think. And I mean, I was team lead at the agency, so I was like, well, I know everything. Let's just start this project, import all those third-party dependencies, open a pull request. How do I do that? Actually, I don't really do that at an agency.
Mm.
And then it started. I ended up with two senior engineers, one from previous Uber, the other one's Sketch Cloud.
Yes.
They challenged me from the get-go, and my PR didn't get approved at all. Why do we
I
need a
understand.
third-party dependency? Why do you do RX Swift? Why don't you just rely on first-class Apple code?
Okay.
And that's when I realized, like, I'm not close to where I can be in a few years, right? So in a way, that was really, really leveling up. And I think that decision in retrospect really made me grow towards the position where I'm today, right? It's also where I started writing more articles, where I did more open source work. I was challenged every day. The application was internationally scaled, so much higher scale, much higher reach. The code, it was a product company, so you have to use the code for years to come. So you can't say goodbye to the code anymore, which means more optimizations, more details, all those kind of things. And that eventually made me grow towards the staff engineer position.
Yes, I think it's great, especially when you begin with senior iOS developer who have a height level manner in how to improve pull request, etc. I lived the same experience 5 years ago with a senior iOS developer that verify in every commit
Yeah.
the atomic commits. This each commit have um, should have a role to. It's not to commit for commit. Should have. And at this moment, I understand the difference between a high senior level
Yeah.
and maybe you have many years of experience, but when it's like to be a great teams like Real Madrid, Barcelona,
Mm.
etc. Something like that. You can be great in other teams, but when you are with great developers who have very high level who have very high level in iOS development and in algorithmics, etc. You find that you should work, should should grow in your level. I was also when I make an interview in Uber in I think 2018. I have the same experience, the same experience as you in the interviewer. I understand at this moment there is a difference of level that I should develop
Hmm.
my skills, etc. To
Yeah.
yes,
And it can be intimidating at first, right? Like, by no means those two engineers that we transferred were bad to me, right? Like they were just sharing what they thought was the best
yes,
practice. And in retrospect, I'm super happy and grateful for them challenging me, right? Because they made me realize how simple code could be, right? Like
yes,
an agency, you have like 8 hours to build an app in
hmm,
theory, right?
yes,
So yeah, you pick a third-party library for everything to be faster. And yeah, at a product company, you have the time to almost build everything yourself. Now, that shouldn't always be the case either. But I mean, it's a different environment, that is for sure.
hmm. But I think that it's very difficult for every iOS developer, Apple developer, to find this kind of company, which are technical companies, which have. It's for me. It's there are two kinds of company. They are technical company like Transfer, Uber, etc., and they are industrial company who who try for commercial purpose. I
Yeah.
know that I know that every company have a commercial purpose, etc. But in technical company, we focus on scalability, on quality of codes, of etc. It's very important for developers to find this kind. But sadly, they are not all companies like that. And for
No.
me, it's very difficult for to our listener to say, oh, okay, you speak about technical company, but there's not all company like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a junior and listening,
Yes.
I would always highly recommend to skip that product company at first, right? Like
Mm,
it's probably a goal to work for an Uber or maybe like a Sketch or Apple or anything like that.
mm,
But I think I would always try to go for maybe not the bigger name
mm,
yet or the higher salary yet. Really think about like what is the environment where I end up working and what do I need in terms of my career right now? Do I need like really high end experienced seniors around me, or do I just need like a playground where I can learn and where it's more or less risky to make mistakes, so to say,
mm,
right? Like, and like you said, the commercial applications or like the agencies or anything like that, it's often more possible to slowly get yourself into a project and learn along the way. Whereas, I mean, if you start at an Uber, it's such a big project, right? Like, and you
mm,
probably just get to work on a small piece of that whole app, and
mm,
that brings so many things you already need to learn. Like, how is that whole project even built, and
mm,
how large is the team, and like where do I ask this question? Everybody has its specialties, probably, right? Like,
mm,
and I think at an agency there's probably less high-end developers, but more all-round developers that can probably guide you at that moment in time much better
mm.
towards like a meteor senior level engineering route, I want to say.
Yes, I understand because every every style of company, if I has his cons and pros. In agency, you can find the ability to make things, know how things work, make it your architecture, etc. And speaking with maybe developers that have the same level with you, and you are not great teams like Uber of hundreds of iOS developers. At this moment, you can have the global vision of the project, but in Uber, I think you have a little bit, you are in the squad, in the teams. At this moment, you are with 2 or 3 developers to make maybe some search of a bus or etc. In you have a special feature that you work, and at this moment, maybe one feature, one feature, 2, 3 features, but you didn't have any idea about all the all how things work. I think I read a book 2 years ago about how Uber make things. They have a business logic developed in C++, and every developers in the front, it's only he make the interface. But all business logic for iOS developer, he didn't know how things work. I understand because at the moment the project is very very big. They should have some good practice to make things. And with hundreds of developers that are in Uber or such as other company of technical company, if you can say so. Okay, it's great for an introduction. I think that you are in love with iOS development since Objective C, Swift, etc. Um, as you said, when you watch the iPhone, you like the iPhone. It's for me, for my experience, it's when I have my first Mac iMac at this moment, 2011. I was in love with with the iMac, and also because it's come from Unix operating system, and for me, I'm very fan from Linux, Ubuntu, etc. I think yes, I like that. I would like to be in to work with this kind of tools. What you keep motivated to work in this iOS development? What you have always energy to share articles to work?
I mean, I think so. What I like to compare it to is, do you know bouldering? Like climbing a wall without rope, trying to get to the end of the route, and you have to touch the final hold with 2 hands.
Yes.
You know that?
Yes.
So we used to do that with colleagues, and you go there after work in the evening. And my colleagues would pick a route, right? You have different colors, different grades. And say my colleagues are at level green, they would pick a green route, and you have like 10 green routes. Whenever that route wouldn't succeed because it's just a little too difficult, many of my colleagues would just go to another route and try that one out. I'm the type of guy that would stick to that one route all evening, try it 200 times until I finish it. And that's pretty much the same with Swift and with app development, right? Like, I want to know everything about it. And when I find something and I don't know what it is, I'll dive in. And oftentimes I do that throughout the week. And then the Tuesday, my article comes out and I write down what I learned, right? So it kind of resonates with me that I build up more and more experience and I really become specialist in what I do. Whereas if I would now also like to go on Rust or Go or anything like that, I would basically start over and I have to redo that whole journey. Whereas, I mean, like, obviously Swiftly is now also a company for me, and RocketSim, and that also drives me to stick to where I'm at. But Swift is so young and evolving, and it becomes better and better that it makes it pretty fun as well to stick around. And I've got friends and I got designers and I got other developers that build awesome stuff too, right? Like, it creates a certain bonding, and yeah, I think that really keeps me going.
Yes, I think also you speak about the community of iOS developer, which is very, very. They make things before April. At this moment, we create things before April that they create. Imagine, for example, Eric Swift was created before Combine for. It was created by iOS developers,
Yeah,
by people who like developing in Apple platforms, etc. I think
yeah,
that the community, uh, the community of Apple developers love doing things with
absolutely.
Apple products, which for me very important because Apple uh, usually give us great tools, great
Mhm.
operating system, great machine, etc. For me, all iOS developer and Apple developer think about that. That
Yeah,
we are in love with Apple. That's why. Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that helps, right? And I think the community is just small enough in a way, right? Like
Also.
I I must be honest, I'm not really sure about the community on web or anything like that, but I can imagine that based on the conferences that I see, which are like
Mm,
3-4 times bigger,
mm,
it's just so much more difficult to get to know like many people in the same community. Whereas if you would go to WWDC next week and you went to a few conferences before, I'm sure you will see a lot of familiar faces, and
yes.
um, that makes it kind of like a small world almost, but more intimate, which
Mm,
I really, really prefer as well.
okay. Okay. Same. I think we have the same conclusion in the yes. Okay. Now we move forward for to speak about our basic topics, which is iOS development tools and practice, and we will dive and into the main subject. What for you are the most favorite iOS development tools that you use daily, and why?
I mean, first, obviously Xcode, right?
Yes. Okay.
There's not really an alternative, which is unfortunate, because that would probably make things better. Xcode is honestly not the best tool, I want to say. But yeah, I mean, it's the
Comparing to
tool.
others, compared to
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
I think we can all think about better alternatives.
Okay.
I know some people are using AppCode or VS Code, but you still kind of are dependent on Xcode for many things.
Mm,
But to be honest, it keeps improving every year and it gets better and better. So I've been developing with Swift 1.1. I'm not sure if you did, but there was no incremental building and there were errors
mhm,
everywhere and there was no documentation and so on. So I guess nowadays development tools, including Xcode, are much better.
yes.
Um, yeah, but yeah, other than that, I think I mean, I can't skip over here, but I would say RocketSim, isn't it?
Okay.
That is that is definitely a favorite tool. But so for those that don't know, RocketSim is a developer tool that I created myself, and I kind of use it as a way to implement all the functionalities that I miss inside Xcode. So I'm building it for the community, but very much for myself as well. And yeah, it definitely helps me build apps faster. So those would be my two favorites. How about
Yes.
you?
For me, to be honest, Xcode. I have some tools. RocketSim, I have the free version, like we spoke last time, but I didn't use it. I'm fine also for Sourcery. It's for
Hmm.
me great tools because I
Yeah,
like the meta language Swift IST based on IST, etc. and Stencil. It's great
yeah,
tools. We use it at Sephora, some other tools, especially to generate our PBX project, etc., like Twist and like Xcode Jane to generate our PBX projects.
yeah.
And we have the famous tools, SPM, Swift Package Manager. For me, it's a
Of
tool.
course.
Yes, Swift
Yeah.
Package Manager. Before, I think you know that Xcode, it was Xcode Builder and
Hmm.
Xcode to create the graphic tools.
Yeah.
It was Xcode Builder to create layout, etc.
Hmm.
And also I like very much also using natively to export my EPA, etc. Xcode, that will organizer, using the organizer, etc. to upload uh, to uh, to the Apple Store.
Mm-hmm.
Tools, other tools, I uh, I use Git Kraken. It's not Xcode tools. Git Kraken. It's for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
great. It's great to handle all repository commits, etc. But I'm very fan for using the terminal to make
Mm-hmm.
everything. But I like Git Kraken because they have given me all the graphics of my PR,
Yeah,
rebasing,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
etc. It's great tools. We use in our application tools development by um, the same developer that developed Sourcery. I forget the name. It's great, so developers.
Mm-hmm.
It's Netfox that we can use to intercept. It's like Proxyman we use
Mm-hmm.
to intercept all our calls, API, etc. We find our headers in the application. You should just check the simulator and you find that.
Right. Yeah.
That's the basic tools that I use.
Yeah, Christoph, you mean, right? From
Christoph,
Sourcery.
yes, Christoph.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Christoph, but I forget.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
no worries. He didn't create Netflix as well, right? Or did he?
I think that's the creator. They create Sorcery. I think
Mm-hmm.
Netfox, and also there is the tools to detect retain cycle, etc.
Yeah,
I I forget that, but the name of the tools, but I will
yeah.
check.
Netflix is
Netfox,
Christoph's.
yes, but also there is another tools to detect retain cycles that
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. That is
forget.
from Christoph as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I forget the name. For me, many tools. The tools that I used before for the auto loading, which it's inject to make all the
Mm-hmm.
auto loading, etc. So
Yeah,
very great tools.
yeah, yeah. That is cool stuff. And these tools are interesting to me, right? Like the inject one.
Inject, yes.
So for RocketSim, I had quite a week, and I've been building it for 5 years. But last week, I found like such a big new
Okay.
kind of like hidden way of working with the simulator, and that opens up so many more possibilities. And I think that brings me back to that Boulder example, right? Like
Mm.
I'm going so deep into what you can do with a simulator that I end up going further and further on that route. And with inject as well, like they do stuff that you're like, how do they do that? Like
Mm.
Apple can nearly do that with previews in a way. So it's fascinating to really get to the borders of what you can do, like the code that is not that well documented, where you
Mm.
can't find everything on Stack Overflow, where ChatGPT doesn't have the answer, right? Like
Yes.
if you then find out how to do something, it's so fulfilling. It's super nice.
Yes. For me, great tools. Inject, RocketSim, Xcode, Twist, many other tools. But maybe we didn't know about that. But for me, that's my daily tools. That's why, from your point of view, what kind of tips that you find in Xcode that maybe not all developers that are less known tips, if we can say it, that you
Hmm.
find particularly useful for iOS developer, such for a junior, mid or senior developer.
Yeah, so it's actually a funny one. I yesterday had a conversation with somebody,
Yes.
and he opened his Xcode project, and he used SF symbols in
Okay.
file names. So I don't know. Imagine having a field called bottom bar.
Mm.
There is like a SF symbol where you see like a bottom bar. So he will put that in front of the file. And he originally is a designer. He told
Okay.
me it's much easier to recognize the icon versus like the file name. So,
Mm.
and honestly, it looked beautiful. He did it with all his Xcode files. Pretty amazing. Um, But yeah, that is more like I kind of like that tip. No, what I would say is there are so many ways to use breakpoints or to use the search navigator. I think that those are often not used in most in like their potential, right? So there's, for example, you can find and replace inside a project with patterns, which allows you to kind of like replace all the strings that start with this and end with that.
Yes.
That to me is oftentimes a game changer if I'm doing like a large refactor that is not easy to do with Xcode's refactoring possibilities. I think the other one would be the memory graph debugger. It's difficult to use at first, but if you know how to use it, it is the way to find retain cycles quickly. And I've been solving memory issues with it a few times that were really annoying for RocketSim as well as for WeTransfer. So I think that, so in general, right, like with these kind of tools, there aren't many articles and also not many videos because it's quite specific to your project, right? Like I can explain anything about the memory graph debugger in an article and I'm sure it will help, but your problem is completely different and I'm not sure if the article will help you that easily solving that as well. So I think what I would recommend in general is at least try to find those WWDC videos, right? It's often what so next week is WWDC actually, right? We're recording this on a Thursday and on this Monday, the keynote is there in the State of the Union.
Yes.
The videos that I would love to see first are those developer tools improvements and such, right? Like, of course, new APIs are fun and so, but I'm sure like, as long as I know they exist, by the time I will implement them, I'll probably look them up either way again at that moment, right? So I much rather look into like, hey, how to use the memory graph debugger that is new in Xcode, or what is new in Xcode, you know, those kind of things that aren't necessarily always covered in articles and get unseen. So yeah, I went a bit all around, but that would be my my summary of tips within Xcode.
Yes, it's great. For me, debugging tools, especially memory graph, it's there is no much articles about that. Despite that, there is, I think, some videos in WWDC speaking about that. But as you said, it's not specific for your project. There is many developers that they have. All of us are problems when they try to find problem in a specific when you have memory leaks. But as I said, Christoph, he created these tools to detect memory leaks that we use in Sephora now, and it's great. But sometimes you try to find for performance using, you need to check what kind of object use other, etc. Specifically when your UI it's very complex, and at this moment you make some revision of your maybe your architecture. How do you think, how do you make things using the debug memory graph? Sometimes I use the debug memory graph to detect some padding, some when you have some UX review, and to check great that I respect the UX design, etc. I use the debugging the graphic debugging review to check I'm 8 points padding, trailing, leading, etc.
Yeah, the field hierarchy debugger, you mean?
Hierarchical, yes, hierarchical debugger.
Yeah. That is useful. Yeah.
Yes, it's very great tools to debugging, and but I think that for your point of view, maybe this kind of debugging, it's a consuming process, it's time consuming process. What strategy do you find of tools do you recommend for efficient debugging in iOS development?
Yeah, I mean, so this is actually funny. This touches upon a feeling that I have about debugging in general. So
yes.
I'm transitioning to also do courses, and one of the courses I want to do is actually on Xcode debugging. And not so much to explain how the memory graph debugger works, but much more about like what is the fastest route towards solving a bug. And I think one of the very first things I would say is like ask yourself the question whether you should fix the bug. Like it sounds stupid, but at WeTransfer, if I look at the crash reports, there's potentially crashes that only happened to 10 users for half a year, right? So yeah, I might want to fix it, but chances are that it might not even happen to anyone anymore because it was so specific, let alone that I will be able to kind of like reproduce it, right? So that would be my first step in that journey. But eventually, when you know where your problem exists, I always try to reproduce it first. And if I can reproduce it, I would try to reproduce it with a unit test to really speed up that cycle of verifying that you solved it. Let alone, oftentimes, you reproduce it once and you're not able to reproduce it again and again and again.
Okay.
So how are you sure that you solved it, right? The only way to be really sure is by having a way to continuously reproduce it via something like a unit test, right? And the extra benefit there is that you prevent regressions. As long as you run the test suite and it doesn't happen, you know that specific bug doesn't return. Yeah, and once you did that, you already prepared yourself in such manner that you lose less time in the whole process. And then it's digging into it. And I'm always time boxing, right? So depending on the priority of the bug, I would say like, okay, I spend an hour on this. And if I don't have any clue after that, I first go for a walk with a dog, or I take a shower, or I continue the next day. Because your brain starts to continue processing, right? And I've had so many times that I walked my dog, who's laying around here near me, so hopefully he stays calm. And I suddenly had like a new insight, and I was like, that is it. Or the next day, I started my work, and in 5 minutes, I fixed the bug because I knew exactly where it was. So if that is not the case, I would try to see if I can do some pair programming. Or yeah, kind of like rubber ducking, right? But then maybe with a real person who can speak back and help you out. And if then you still didn't find the solution, yeah, that is tricky.
Yes,
that is really tricky. And yeah, I think oftentimes you know at least where in the code it exists. So what you see developers do is grab that code, move it into an isolated project, see if you can reproduce it there, because you take away the environment influences. Sometimes it doesn't happen there, you know, like you're like, this is weird. So, but it can give you clues, right? You need to keep the ball rolling and don't end up just searching endlessly on Google or Stack Overflow. Try out things and give yourself more and more input to verify what is not working and what is working, and that eventually will lead you to the answer that you need for the problem that you have. And more recently, I think you can also ask AI nowadays.
ChatGPT.
Copy the code, paste it into ChatGPT, and ask like, "Hey, I have a crash in this code. Where can it be?" And oftentimes you're surprised. They know more than you think. So yeah, hopefully those are useful tips.
Yes, using AI now, it's very famous, and I think it's good for any levels of developer to check, because sometimes with Stack Overflow, etc., we need to wait to the response, etc. Sometimes it's but I think that developers should have this ability to write correctly the question to get the great question, the great response for that. Because sometimes as developers we know how to write code, but we don't have the ability to write expose our question in a good manner. At this moment, we should improve our soft skills in this.
Absolutely.
Yes, and when we speak about code quality, etc., I think that comes to me to speak about how you can ensure code quality using uh, before that we get the book, how we can ensure this quality and maintainability of our projects.
Yeah.
If there is any specific tools that you use to ensure that I know Swift format, etc. But for me, it's
Hmm.
not the quality of the code. It's the
Yeah, that's more
it's
syntaxing. Yeah.
styling code. But for me, the
Hmm.
quality of the code, how you can ensure the quality of the code and the maintainability of the code in your
Yeah.
projects.
I think the biggest influence there would be writing unit tests.
Okay.
It verifies that your assumptions are correct. It forces you to write code in such a way that it's testable, but you also verify that the code actually works. And beside that, I would say async await as well, because
Mm,
the code becomes more reasonable, it's structured, and there's no closures that
okay. Yeah.
potentially retain anything unexpectedly. The compiler will help you about the things that you potentially are going to retain and such, right? So I think that is the general approach I would take. Benefit as much as you can from compile time safety and
Mm.
unit tests, and then yeah, let
But
your
okay.
logs tell you what's wrong.
Yes, unit testing, but you should have before a good architecture for unit because sometimes and especially when you come with the legacy code, spaghetti code, and
Mhm.
you try to make unit testing, etc. At this moment, you need to if we refactor all the code of the class, etc. And for me, it's very difficult, especially when you are in industrial company to make things correctly when you come new to a new project and you find that there is no unit test, there is
Yeah,
no
that
automation,
sucks.
there is and you have only 8 months to make the migration from React Native, for example, to Swift. Imagine you are very, you don't have a lot of time. But for me,
Yeah,
this
terrible.
comes the attitude of the developer.
Hmm.
Uh, he accept that or not, because at this moment, if you accept that you have 8 months or 1 year to do things correctly, I think it's a problem because it's impossible to do things.
Yeah,
At this
totally.
moment, quality code for me it's it's a compromission between how developer think about the quality of code and how company think also about scalability, the quality of the code, and why it's important for the future of the product and because
Yeah,
we have a project, many projects, but we have mainly the product it's we transfer application that we should keep scalability of this the product using unit test, using integration test if we can that, and automation, have the continuous delivery. We will speak about that in the next question. For me, it's also it's very important to have this attitude of delivery, continuous delivery, to test, to have usually the feedback of our customers
yeah,
very fast. What do you think
absolutely.
about how to automate things? I think you use tools like Fastlane, other Jenkins, etc. Do you think that these tools are mandatory now? And for you, which kind of automation tools that you advise to junior, especially junior developers?
Yeah, so first, remember, right? Like, if you do something 100 times a day and you
Yes.
can automate it, imagine what time it saves you, right? So
Mm,
some people think it's not worth spending time on the automation because it takes time, but eventually, like on the end, it will save you time.
yes.
Um, for me, I would say like I need to do it more. Honestly, for RocketSim, I'm still doing manual releases. It's quite stupid, but no, yeah, I mean, like CI tools, right? Like Bitrise, CodeMagic, maybe Xcode Cloud, yeah, whatever is your favorite. But those kind of tools, get yourself a little bit familiar at least with what they do, and yeah, make sure they do the repetitive tasks that take most time. And oftentimes, creating an archive, uploading it to App Store Connect, and such, those are time consuming, right? So yeah, that would be my number one recommendation in terms of automations. Yeah.
I understand. Having these tools to automate the continuous delivery, etc., and maybe that automation tools will detect specifically problem in unit testing, integration testing, etc., and we have very quickly the feedback before that we make our application production, which for me it's a great automation tool. Now we should go forward to the practical time with RocketSim. I will first of all I will let you speak about RocketSim for people who listen to us and didn't know about RocketSim. Can you give us a little bit about how you thought about RocketSim and what its benefits for iOS developers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we have people watching us, but some only listen as well. So I try to explain it in such a way that everybody can follow along.
Okay.
And maybe it's best when I talk about RocketSim to also share my screen
Yes.
right away. So let me do that for those watching. And yeah, so RocketSim is an Xcode simulator developer tool, and you basically install it from the Mac App Store, and it will automatically, based on a few permissions, run with your window. So wherever you drag your window of the simulator, the RocketSim window will be kind of a companion next to the simulator.
Okay.
And it comes with all kinds of features, from which some are existing in the simulator, but just not easily accessible, or accessible via Xcode only. For example, the accessibility toggles that I have right here to increase contrast, to change the appearance of dark mode, to change the dynamic type.
Yes.
They are only accessible via Xcode. So if you're debugging, then you need to go into like the debug bar on Xcode and change the environment overrides there. Whereas this is just more convenient, right? Like you're in the simulator. This is, by the way, the slow animations that I just built yesterday.
Yesterday, I see I see the in LinkedIn.
That's
yes.
You see some new footage here.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it just makes it much easier to do this while you're next to the simulator, right? Like being able to see it right at the place where you are with your debugging app. So that is like the basic idea of RocketSim. I want developers to build apps faster by making repetitive tasks more approachable. And originally, so let me turn off slow animations. And originally, the first thing that RocketSim did was creating deep links. So here I don't have any deep links for this application. But if I go to Stock Analyzer, so now I switched to another recent build of the simulator, you can see that I have 3 deep links configured. Stock Analyzer is another iOS app I'm developing personally. And as you can see, I click on the button and it directly opens that deep link in the simulator.
Yes.
Before RocketSim, I had like a deeplinks.html file on my web server to execute those deep links from an HTML page via Safari.
Yes.
It was cumbersome. It took time, and now I can configure it here and make it work much faster. Similar with push notifications.
Yes.
Bear with me because I have a debug build, so it could be that I updated this one. But the idea is that you can configure push notifications, and they are called app actions. And you can basically change everything you need for the
payload.
push notification
Yes.
and send it accordingly. I might just not have the permissions accepted here. Can I do that quickly?
Yes.
There you go. That's what I mean. Live demos.
No problem.
Now we can test it right here as well. No. Okay. So, well, trust me, it works.
Yes. Maybe.
But yeah, the idea is that you can send push notifications to the simulator as well.
Okay.
You can simulate the location either by selecting a specific place
Okay.
or by creating a place and store it.
Yes.
And the benefit there is that you can reuse it, right? Like oftentimes when you debug your app, you're doing the same things over and over again.
Yes.
And I'll just go over a few. There's no one sentence to describe RocketSim, right? So I'll just cover a few of the main features.
Yes.
Permissions, so you can reset the permissions if you will. And those are permissions like photo library access. So if you're building that, you can reset it and test your flow right away again. This is one of those features that is unique to RocketSim. It's airplane mode. It basically blocks all the networking connections from the simulator and shows what's going on. User defaults editor. And I shouldn't open that one. I should open this one, standard defaults. Here you can see the settings for my application. So it's for the stock analyzer. You saw the little blue thing here. That's basically saying like, hey, the value just updated.
Yes.
But yeah, it's interactive, so I can change this boolean here, and you can see that it changes in the app as well, which allows me to test like, hey, if I turn it back on, does it update the user defaults? Those are all kind of things that you would otherwise also be able to do, but this makes it just much more convenient, isn't it? So finally on this page, we have the build insights. Those are built like last month. I just released it. And it comes with team insights as well. So the idea is that for a whole team, you bundle together all the build durations. And maybe you find out that one of your colleagues built the project much faster. So you are going to look up his machine setup and you give the whole team the same machine setup. And hopefully for you all, that is like an M3 Max or something. But it's at least a way to optimize your team's build performance. And then the comparing feature, which I like a lot as well. You can see that I show a grid as an overlay, but you can also use the rulers, and that allows you to place a ruler at a specific point on the simulator. And you can see from the instructions, if we hold shift, we can show the distance, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, very helpful. Yes.
Yeah, very useful. And let me hide that for now. And we can overlay an image. And this is a terrible image here for this example, but you can see what it does, right? Like it places a potential design of the view on top of it. And what it allows you is to really like compare between whether you implemented the feature correctly or not.
To make snapshot testing. If you
manual snapshot testing, right?
Manual snapshot, yes.
Yeah. Yes. If you're building on a feature and you want to see if you're doing a great job, then this is a nice way. This is the magnifier, so I'm holding shift now. This is a bug. I didn't notice. You can see that distance is still being visible. This is why you should foot your own app.
Yes.
Similar, like the cursor shouldn't be there. Either way, debug build. But imagine that you can use the magnifier to zoom in on a certain pixel, get the color code, which is black in this case, and potentially copy it even as code, if you will, and then you can directly use it in your project. So if a color, for example, looks like this, kind of hijacking that text field there. Slow animations. I shortly showed it before. It's just a neat way to test UI kit animations.
Yes.
Swift UI animations sometimes work as well, not always. those fancy particle animations and such will not be slowed down, but it's still a pretty useful feature if you are working on animations in your app.
Yes, to find if the animation work correctly, etc. Like, in slow motion.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, for those that were sharp, they saw that my time on the simulator is different than my time on my MacBook.
Okay.
And that is because I enabled the status bar customization of
Okay.
941.
Yes.
If you don't know what that means, you should look it up. It's an important detail to know as an
Okay.
Apple engineer.
Okay.
But yeah, you can customize it as well if you will to anything you like. You can see that the cellular bars are updating, or the Wi-Fi is going down, bad connection. If you kind of like want to alter that to something different, yeah, this could be a fun way to work around with it. I need to do charging probably to make a change. There you go.
Okay.
And then another feature that saw its light quite in the beginning, evolved quite a bit, is the recording feature.
Okay.
And I know the simulator comes with recording here as well.
Yes.
But yeah, this one comes with features like touches, device bezels, even audio recording. And then I'm not talking about me talking as an audio recording, but I'm talking about audio coming out of your app.
Yes, in the application. Yes.
Yeah, which is pretty important for some apps, right?
Yes.
If you want to convey what you're building. And for the touches, I like to show another setting that not known for everyone, but it's the show touch attention and
Yes.
even the stroke around touches.
Okay.
So let's for the sake of this demo, pick a nice purple color, and then yeah, we can start recording. So let's do the MP4 recording. Let me close this one, and then we go to the watch list, and you can already see the touches. That is because it's a debug build. That's for my my debugging purposes. But yeah, if we now stop, yeah, you can't see it on the recording because it's on my different screen, but there's a thumbnail being shown with the recording, and here you can see the final result. So the touch attention, what it does, it continuously shows the dot, and when you press, the circle will go down. So you
very great for demonstration, etc.
Yeah,
very,
exactly.
very useful. Very useful.
Very useful, and
yes,
I think yeah, you shouldn't underestimate the value of this, because it's really known for you because you do the demo of what you're doing. But for those that aren't there, can follow along much better by doing it this way. So
by using it.
Yeah, that is another key feature. I think RocketSim makes RocketSim unique. And finally, there are neat little details like minimizing the window, because I know not everybody likes that window being floating around all the time. And now you can see it being hidden here, and you can bring it back. So yeah, you can tell that I went quite far and crazy about it. But yeah, I think this tool helps a lot of developers already today. I got a few thousand subscribers that use the pro version, and yeah, it's a no-brainer because they build apps fast via it, right? So they can earn back the money invested quite rapidly and evolving. Like I said, I'm working on awesome stuff that's coming soon. So
yes. Great tools, honestly, great tools. We use for my side. I use deep links. Make some, especially deep links because they are in free version. But I think that we will all buy the pro version. For me, I think it's a great investment to make great to use a simulator as its kind of behavior. Something great, and I'm discovering now new things about RocketSim. Very useful.
And that is the tricky part, right? Like, let me stop sharing.
Okay.
Because it has so many features, it's really hard to make it all discoverable. So I'm really trying to do a better job there, because I'm sure many developers don't even realize what it can bring in terms of value, right? So if I can convey that message in a better way, I'm sure more developers will find it interesting and useful.
Okay. Great, Antoine. It was very great, this presentation of RocketSim, or the discussion interview with you as a special guest in Swift Academy, the podcast. I think that we have learned a lot for your experience as iOS developer in 14 years, and staff iOS engineering now in we transfer as such a humble person with which I like very much in your uh, uh, how when I spoke to you first of all, yes, we can make the podcast, no
Of
problem,
course.
which for me it's great for a person who are very known in the community. For me, thank you a lot for that, and we hope that this podcast will be helpful for our listeners who are and also people who will see or watch this the podcast. I will let you the final um, to finalize this podcast. What do you think? What for the future? What are your ambitions with RocketSim? I think with uh, uh, with your career as a staff iOS engineering.
Yeah. So I think it won't be a surprise, but my dream is to eventually go indie, fully focusing
Okay.
on Rocket Sim, and I guess my very first next big thing would be to do the courses. So I'm actually already well, you can see it for those that recognize
Yes,
it
yes.
there, right? Like I'm trying to optimize my whole home studio, so to say. I get like acoustic panels tomorrow for the ceiling.
Okay.
So hopefully somewhere next week I'm more or less ready to start recording.
Okay.
And yeah, it's going to be a new challenge, but that's going to be super fun. And it's a way for me to share learnings that I wouldn't necessarily write about. And by presenting in a course, you can convey different stuff, right? So I'm really looking forward to enter that journey and see how that goes. And yeah, stay tuned, because RocketSim gets evolved rapidly soon, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Antoine, and see you again. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
Thank you.
Bye bye.